I did a video in early 2013 of me scanning some 8mm film, but with no commentary to explain it. So I was thinking of grabbing that clip and just putting narration over it so people know what's going on. Then I thought it's been 7 years, so I thought someone must have done an instructional video by now, but when I looked, there wasn't really any more Telecine videos than there was back then. So I thought I might as well cobble together a slightly better video. The problem is it's going to be rough as guts, because I don't have the setup anymore, and I'm not going to recreate it. And the only footage I've got from back then is from a crappy old camera that can only record in 320 by 240 and 15 frames. And in fact it's too hard to give you full instructions, so I'm only going to tell you what I remember, which is probably not going to be a problem because nobody's going to be scanning film these days, so this video is more for curiosity's sake. First I thought I'd shop around for people converting film to video, but at $20 to $30 a roll, that ain't going to happen when you got 20 rolls and no income. I also read some places was just videotaping a projected image on a wall and charging that much, so I thought I might as well try that. It kind of works, it's just that it's not great, at least not great with a 1MP camera. A better camera, which I couldn't afford, and some post-production, and it might have been acceptable, but I was looking for something better. Actually, for the number of times I've watched these videos, it probably doesn't need to be super high quality. When I was looking for prices, I stumbled across Telecine. The problem was most DIY Telecines were expensive digital cameras mounted on projectors with adapters, which again is too expensive. And that's when I stumbled across this flatbed scanner Telecine. I already had an Epson scanner, regarded the best for transferring negatives to digital images, so I thought I'd give it a shot. I got a better scanner later, but this is the Epson 1660 that I had. The 1660 is a low-end model, and I found out later it can only do about 8 or 9 frames per strip. The first thing you need is a film guide. Ideally you'd sandwich the film between two pieces of anti-Newton ring glass. Newton rings are those rainbow circles that looks like oil on water. In my case I used a plastic spacer and a sheet of picture frame glass. I didn't want to find and pay for anti-Newton glass, so I lived with the rainbows. What I found was the focus point of the scanner isn't on its own glass bed, so I raised the film on something like a 0.3mm sheet of plastic and cut a window in it. The window slot had a slight problem because the film would sag in and out of it and go slightly in and out of focus. You also need a light level window here. The scanner does a short light level scan to get the levels right before it does the major scan. I then glued 2 guides to make a channel for the film so it can't move sideways. I then topped it off with a sheet of glass from a cheap picture frame. I think the glass had a problem with its sharp edges because I stoned them down with an oil stone to make them round, but the ground glass was still abrasive and I think it scratched the film. Like materials scratch themselves, so to stop the plastic film scratching on the plastic spacer, I put yellow post-it note paper down in the guide. I got the drive sprocket off a $10 projector that I found at a swap meet. I went with a convoluted S-path for the film because I wanted a 180-degree wrap on the drive sprocket. You need fairly accurate position of the frames on the scan, so if you only drive it by a few holes, the frame can move due to slop in the drive holes. This is the stepper motor with a drive shaft through to the sprocket on the other side. I also added a timing wheel with a mark, so if the marker didn't hit the arrow, I knew the stepper lost a step. The stepper motor is driven by this DIY stepper driver, and that is controlled through the parallel port of a PC. Luckily, PCs still had parallel ports back then. I remember buying this stepper for $5 at a flea market years ago. The missing chip is the ULN 2003. Initially it didn't work properly, but after I fitted the LEDs I noticed the sequence was wrong, so a quick swap of 2 channels and it worked fine. I think this is the circuit because it kind of looks familiar. Remember, if you make a mistake here you could blow the parallel port on your PC. I then needed something to take up the film slack, so I got a geared motor from the electronics shop with a rubber band to the real drive pulley, which was turned off and on by a cam on the drive shaft and a micro switch. The other big problem was dust. You've got a plastic strip that's rubbing and collecting charge, and boy did that attract dust. I used 2 big makeup brushes as a primary clean, but further on I had a folded piece of cloth sandwiching the film. This is the Epson V500 scanner that I got brand new for $100, and this one can scan 16 frames at a time. I grabbed my old PC, which still has the old software on it, and I'll try to recreate what I did from memory. The first thing, this is Scan Controller version 7. Scan Controller has been replaced by Cine Strip Scanner, so if it's different from what I'm about to show you, You'll have to sort that out. Down here is the number of steps and buttons either side for direction. I think this is just for testing. I think transport settings up here is for the actual program steps. That's just a warning message because nothing's connected. Next is setting up the scanner. It's mainly just scan quality. Then select the source. Basically it selects the scanner. Next is acquire. Scanner's not connected. To get the program to press the scan button, you drag the crosshair over the position of the button. When you have everything set up, you just press run. The scan controller is running and it increments the stepper. It opens the scanner software and it presses the scan button. As for time, something in my memory tells me it was 9 hours for 200 foot of film, which is 4 reels stuck together. We start Cine to Vid Pro, and this is version 1.5. The current version says 3.1, so you'll have to figure out the difference. I can't actually get this old program to work properly anymore, so the best I can do is give quick overviews. The file section handles projects, like create, modify and recall. When you create a project, the most important thing is the name, because it has to be 4 letters, all in capitals. Give it a description. Create a directory. And that fills in a lot of the entries in the table. Next we have to put our scanned strips in the strip folder. We've scanned our reel, and there's about 900 strips for 200 feet, which is 4 rolls of 3-minute film. We separate the strips and put them in the strip folder of their respective project. Then we have to rename all the strips sequentially with the 4-letter capitalized project name at the start and 4 numbers. I'll just copy the R-ball strips into the test strip folder. We try to set the start frame, but it goes red because it's not accepted. So I go to the bulk rename utility. Cine to Vid Pro also has a renumbering tool if you want to use that one. Find the folder with the wrong labeled strips. Change R-ball to test. Hit select all, and the preview shows R-ball being changed to test. Then just hit rename. We go to our folder and they're all renamed. We try it now and it's accepted, because now the file prefix matches the project name. You have to set up other things on the main screen, but you better look in the help for what to do. The next is functions, and we'll start with define required commands. This sets up the programs for the buttons below. You can run the scan controller from a button on the main page of this program, but from the video it looks like I was running it externally all by itself. Saving parameters for frames is just the quality you want to save it at, but the main one is define adjust extraction parameters. This is complicated and I don't really remember how to use it, so it's best to read up on the help files. It does frame extraction dimensions, contrast of the drive pin hole so it's easier to detect, number of frames to extract, the strip direction, whether it's mirrored, and the join adjustment between strips. When it's right, hit apply and then the adjustment appears. Hit that and you get a strip joint adjustment box. I can't get mine working because of an error. This program is too strict and just won't work unless everything's perfect. What it allows you to do is flip between the start and finishing frames of 2 different strips, and if one frame jumps you can change the alignment so there's a smooth transition. You should be seeing the picture in there and then you just flip between the 2 frames. The other stuff in function is pretty basic stuff. You don't have to worry about options, at least I didn't use any of them. The main thing in tools is clean frames and sharpen images. I did my sharpening in post video editing, so I didn't use them. So you're going to have to look up help to figure out how to use them. And the most important is the help files. Mechanically, I think it does a rectangular box select and copy over each frame, but the box select has fixed XY coordinates, and that means if the location of a strip isn't similar each time, the frames will wobble and look like shake. And that's dependent on the clearance in the guide and how much the film can move sideways, and on the position of the edge that separates frames. As an example, keep your eye on the clearance and the frame position on this sped up video. Most of it can be removed in post, so it's not a deal breaker, but the more accurate the better. Post-production anti-shake zooms in and crops the outside edge, depending on how much it's shaking. so an accurate frame might stop heads being cut off. Next we generate frames. We have to locate the sprocket hole, so we click this box on top of it. Then we hit calibrate so it can self-align to the hole color and start the frame generation. You can kind of see the jumps between strips, so that needs a bit of adjusting. The generated frames are in the frames folder. Then we have to stick all the frames together and generate movie. I couldn't get this to work either, so you'll have to look it up as well. The generated movie will be in the video folder. There used to be a forum if you needed some help, but now that seems to all be gone. So it's either play around till it works, or you have to email Wolfgang directly. On a side note, Technology Connections did a good video on why film in the past was in HD. Evidently because the silver nitrate particles are so fine, you can scan it at higher and higher resolutions until you can't see it make any difference. Like Star Trek The Next Generation was all filmed on 35mm film, so you can scan it now and it'll be 4K. But the latest Star Trek Voyager was filmed in video, so the highest resolution it'll ever be is 480p. And that means you can get decent quality out of any film, no matter how old it is. On one hand, it's nice to have high quality, but on the other hand, how much quality do you really need? Like at the time, I wasn't happy with the faults in the conversion, but after realising we've only watched most of them once in the 7 years, the quality is plenty good enough. Plus when I go, all this stuff is going in the bin, because newer generations have no interest in these old videos. Basically anyone not in the video is not really going to care about them. So how much quality do I really need? This is probably the only one that's been watched a dozen times.